It's time for another musical interlude. Let's get started. Talking with people with music in their genes, their blood, and in their soul. You are watching Musical Interlude. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Musical Interlude. I'm your host, Casey Bell, and Randy Seedorff is joining me today for another episode of Musical Interlude. Let's get started. All right, so when is your earliest memory of you discovering your music talent?
Oh, I was young. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. Um, I grew up in a musical family, so music was always around our house. My mother played piano. She was a multi-instrumentalist. She played guitar, saxophone, accordion, piano. She was an organist at our church. Um, so she practiced a lot on Saturdays. And I would sit down on the piano bench with her when I was a little boy and sing along with her. So that's probably my earliest memory, just around the house on Saturday afternoon, hanging out with mom. So,
Oh, so when did it turn into a idea of you might do it as a profession?
ah, well, I guess I was a teenager, and I started collaborating with some friends. Um, Earlier than that, maybe back up about 3 or 4 years, I started playing the guitar pretty seriously when I was 11 or 12. And so by the time I got into junior high and high school, um, I started making some friends with people who played. And, uh, and we actually started writing some songs back then. That was kind of my first venture into songwriting and learning about collaborating and um, enjoying another person playing the same instrument that maybe knew some things that I didn't, or maybe knew more than I did, and learning from other people. That's kind of when that started, and um, I I realized that I had some gifting and some graces for that. So I started to pursue it more seriously then, probably as a teenager, in my late teens, especially. Started playing in a band back then, and started really getting the bug then that maybe this could be something.
So when did you first start to get into the business, and um, how did you gain the knowledge to start? Because there really still isn't a how-to guide of how to get into the entertainment business.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was a teenager, I had a really good friend. Um, Again, this was kind of my songwriting partner, my first collaboration, with songwriting. And we found out that down in the Plaza area and in the Brookside area that they had a lot of open mics here in Kansas City. And there's a lot of live music when the health situation allows in Kansas City. There's a lot of clubs, a lot of live venues, a lot of great places where um, you might just hear someone with a piano, or you might hear just a guitarist, and they can real intimate settings where they can really interact with the audience. And so we started going to a club down in Brookside and on Friday nights and doing a live, just impromptu open mic as a duo. And those were kind of my first professional gigs, playing in front of a live audience. And man, we were fearless. We were busting out, original songs that we'd written. I mean, some of them were terrible, but we didn't care. We just busted them out on this audience and did some Eagle covers and Dan Fogelberg and Jim Croce and all the singer songwriter stuff that was popular when we were that age. It was just, I mean, it was a fabulous time for that. So.
And when did you step into the studio for the first time?
Uh, I was in my early 20s, and I was asked to sing backing vocals on another person's project. And that was my first experience at Chapman Studios in downtown Kansas City, right on the other side of the Broadway Bridge, right on the edge of downtown Kansas City. And I remember being petrified. I'd never been in the studio before, and it can be a little intimidating, in that environment if you've never been there. And that's the first time I had played on someone else's project and sang. And then I got a couple of invitations after that to do some acoustic guitar work on some other people's projects, and just kind of grew from there until I started doing my own.
Awesome. So tell me about Family Tree. What inspired that?
Oh, well, I think if we all look back at our life, regardless of, our social status, our economic status, where we grew up, whether whether we grew up in the city or the country, if we're from the north or from the south, we have some landmark moments in our life, right? Some things that, regardless of how old we get, we'll never forget the details of those things. And so I picked out 3 of those things in my life that I felt like were super important to me. And I was reflecting on that one day, and I had already started another song, and it just like they both came together in Family Tree. My family, I had 7 brothers and sisters growing up in a 3-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. It was a zoo, man. But one of the things that we loved was, that's how I learned to sing, was hanging out with my brothers and sisters. Riding in the car, we would even sing harmony together. So those memories are just like part of the fiber of my memory. When my son was born, that changed me. It's like that moment when I looked into his eyes, we locked eyes for the first time. And I knew that I was a parent, for the first time. I started telling him, all the things we were going to do when he got older, and all the, the way I was going to love him for the rest of his life. And, I can tell you what time it was and what day it was and all that. I mean, and the same thing with the third part of the song, which is when I accept Christ to be my Savior. That moment when I got up from my chair and I went to an altar and I gave my life to the Lord. And that decision has, affected every other decision in my life since then. So that became part of the song.
So those all the components is what inspired you to write this song.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. So is this a very new project, or are you one of those artists who are always working on something new?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I had a conversation with my producer while I was driving into the city this morning about our next project. And our current project is releasing on April 2nd. It hasn't even released yet, and we're talking about the next thing that we want to do. And I've begun the writing process for the next album. So that's a both and for me. Yes, this is a new project, very new. The album art and everything just went to the printer for physical CDs yesterday. And it'll be released digitally April the 2nd. So our next album is going to be probably an all acoustic album, and probably more of a roots bluegrass type album, just stripped down, really, just kind of almost jug band, Appalachian, just dirt road acoustic music, so that's kind of what's next on the program as far as I'm concerned. That's kind of what I feel inspired to write right now.
Cool. So all artists have something in common, whether they're, writers, singers, visual artists, fine artists. They work in two places. They work at home, and then once their art is done, they display it somewhere. Obviously, March 2020, that made artists have to find a completely different way to display their art. And so when it first started happening, what was your mind? What were you thinking? And were you able to make changes to how you do your art?
Well, I'm also a pastor, and so I have a group of people that I try to stay connected to. That was very difficult when all this began, really unprecedented times. And so we had to be creative about how we stayed connected with people. Um, Usually church is about being in the same room, or at least being in the same building, right? And gathering in small groups, or, and even large crowds. And both of those things were out at the beginning. So what I started to do was a nightly devotional and concert from my house on Facebook Live. And I did that for several months. And it was my way of staying connected to the folks that I love and that I serve with. But it was also a way for the people that follow me as an artist to stay connected with me. And so that's kind of how it started. I've done a couple of live streams since then. We're filling up our calendar right now with opportunities to go into the Missouri State Corrections facilities. We're going to be doing some prison concerts. Actually, the first one is coming up April 17th, and then we have another one on April 24th. So we already have two on the books, and these are yard concerts where we go out inside the yard, set up a concert stage, and do a concert for the population. So in answer to your question, I was able to display my art online through like a live stream venue. And now we're trying to evolve back to live performances. So.
Well, I do like the idea of the performing for correctional facilities. They need live entertainment just as much as we do.
Mm-hmm.
So my last question for you is a fun question. It's pretend, so the individual you named does not actually have to be alive anymore, nor do they have to be well known. But if there was someone in the music industry that ever influenced you, or you enjoyed listening to their music, and you ever had the chance to collaborate with them, whether it be a producer, a writer, a composer, a singer, a musician, whoever it may be, who would that be and why?
Well, as a pastor and a Christian artist, I really enjoy Stephen Curtis Chapman. And I think he's, in my time, one of the most prolific songwriters that of my genre. And just in general, I think he's written so much great material. And he's one of those artists that has stayed around and stayed around and stayed around, but at the same time has remained relevant. So I can't answer with this with just one person. Okay, Casey, I have to include Vince Gill, who's one of my guitar heroes, is, the most awarded country music artist of all time. He's done over 40,000 sessions as a singer and a guitarist on other people's records besides his own. And to round out his career, he's got this little side job with a group called the Eagles, kind of to top off his career, which is not a bad gig to end your career on, right? So I would say those two people for that reason. I respect them as both writers, musicians, and singers.
Fiber of my memory. Close your eyes and bow your head. It's time for us to pray. I ran from my chair down to the altar, baptized me in the cleansing water. Oh, Jesus washed me white as snow. You could have heard those angels sing.
That's all the time we have for you today on this episode of Musical Interlude. I'd like to thank our guest, Randy Seedorff, and of course you, the audience, for taking the time to watch. Thank you. Have a great day.